The desert didn't speak, but it remembered. Every boot that crossed its sand left a memory, and hers were fresh. She rode like someone who didn't care if the sun burned her skin or if the wind cut through her bones. The mare beneath her was tired, ribs showing, and each hoof step kicked up dry ghosts of dirt that trailed behind, like the regrets she couldn't leave behind fast enough. Her coat was torn at the sleeves, her collar pulled high, not against the cold. There was none, but against being seen. The town ahead wasn't on any map worth keeping. Just a row of low buildings, a cracked well, and the kind of silence that only came when everyone was watching through slatted windows. She didn't come here looking for redemption. She didn't believe in it. No one who's buried what she's buried does. Her name wasn't important. Not here, not anymore. Names only gave lawmen something to write down. What she carried instead was silence. A revolver that clicked too loud when cocked. And a hunger she hadn't felt since the night she ran. Hunger for a way out. Hunger for one more chance at anything before the world caught up to her. She pulled the reins slow as she entered the town, eyes scanning every shadow. Children weren't playing. Doors weren't open. There was only one man standing still, beside a horse that looked like it belonged to someone who didn't ask for permission. He leaned on a post outside the saloon, hat low over his eyes, chewing on a toothpick like it was the last piece of peace in the world. She studied him the way a cornered fox studies a loaded trap, with fear that wore the mask of curiosity. Something about him didn't fit. He wasn't lounging like a drunk or pacing like a deputy. He was still, too still. The kind of stillness that only came from having seen too much and having nothing left to prove. She kept her distance, tied her mare outside the general store, and walked inside like she wasn't falling apart inside. Bought a can of beans, a matchbook, and a look from the old man behind the counter that said, "I don't want trouble." She gave him a smile that said, "Too late." When she came back out, he was still there. The man, the horse, and the silence. Her boots crunched dry dirt as she passed him, eyes forward, spine tight. He didn't speak. But when she reached the edge of the saloon's porch, he turned his head slightly. Just enough. "That your mare with the bad knee?" he asked, voice like leather left in the sun too long. She stopped. Didn't turn. "You offering to buy her?" "No," he said. "Just asking if she can carry what's chasing you." It was almost enough to draw her gun right there. But her breath caught, and something colder than the desert wind ran through her. She kept walking, heart pounding, brain calculating. Who the hell was he? By nightfall, she'd made up her mind. If she was going to make it to the border, she needed a better horse. Hers wouldn't last another day. The stranger's horse, that deep-chested, sure-footed roan, was the only ticket she had left. It wasn't just desperation now. It was survival. And she'd done worse than stealing to survive. She waited until the sky dimmed to copper and the saloon grew quiet behind drawn curtains. He hadn't moved much, just shifted to lean on the rail, rolling a match between his fingers. His saddle was still on the horse, like he knew he might leave at a moment's notice. She approached slow, boots muffled by the dust, heart pacing ahead of her. As she stepped into the moonlight, he spoke again without turning. "Long ride ahead of you?" She pulled her revolver, cocked it once, loud enough to silence the cicadas. "Don't talk," she said. "Just back away from the horse." He didn't flinch, didn't reach for his gun, just turned to face her. eyes dark, calm, unreadable. "You're shaking," he said. "Bad way to hold a gun." "I said don't talk." He studied her. Not like a man afraid, but like someone trying to remember something he'd seen before. A story unfolding the same way again. She stepped closer. Her hand trembled, but her fingers stayed steady on the trigger. "I'm taking the horse." He nodded slowly. "I figured." She grabbed the reins, backed up, never breaking eye contact. The horse resisted at first, loyal maybe. But she whispered soft, and it moved. She climbed up, hands still shaky, and pulled the brim of her hat low. Her lips parted to breathe, to curse, to scream inside. But she said nothing. As she turned the horse to leave, he called out one last time, voice still even. "You forgot one thing." She paused. He grinned, not cruel, just tired. "That saddle you're riding? It belongs to a U.S. Marshal." Her stomach dropped, but she didn't look back. She kicked the horse and rode hard into the dark. Behind her, the town exhaled like it had been holding its breath all day. But the man didn't move. He just leaned back, picked up the match he'd dropped, and struck it. The flame lit up the lines in his face, not anger, not regret, just patience. Because he knew something she didn't. He wasn't done with her yet. She was a speck on the horizon now, swallowed by the desert heat that shimmered in waves across the sand. He didn't squint to follow her. He didn't lift his hand to shade his eyes. He just stood there, arms folded across his chest, watching the trail of dust unravel behind her like a frayed thread being pulled loose. There was no urgency in his posture, no outrage, no insult in the theft. Just the kind of calm that comes from knowing storms don't end. They circle. The roan horse was gone, of course, but he hadn't planned on keeping it. That saddle, though, that was something else. He'd carried it for 15 years, longer than he carried his badge, longer than he carried peace. The engraving beneath the flap was faint now, almost worn smooth. U.S. Marshal, Grant McCall. But he hadn't spoken that name in years. He turned and stepped off the saloon porch, boots crunching over dry gravel, moving slow, purposeful. Behind the saloon, behind a rusted water trough and a pile of broken crates, was an old shed. Inside, under a tarp, was another horse. Not as pretty as the roan. A little older, a little leaner, but fast, reliable. He tossed the tarp aside and whispered to the gelding like he was greeting an old friend. The horse blinked at him, calm. He worked the saddle straps without a word, his fingers moving from muscle memory. No rush, no fear. He wasn't chasing her out of anger. He was following something older than rage, something quieter. As he worked, his thoughts drifted, uninvited but inevitable. He remembered the badge. Not the shine of it, but the weight. Not the honor, but the cost. He'd pinned it on for the first time when he was 28. Young, stubborn, and full of something he mistook for justice. Back then, he thought law was a clean line. You were on one side or the other. Then came the Dalton raid. It was in a town smaller than this one, up north where the air was colder and the whiskey burned cleaner. A gang had taken a family hostage inside a general store. Grant had gone in first. No backup, no plan. Just blind belief that courage could outdraw chaos. The bullets came fast. He shot 3 men that day, but he didn't see the girl in the back corner. She couldn't have been more than 12. Her name was Clara. She bled out in his arms before he even knew where the wound was. He left the marshals 2 weeks later. Didn't say goodbye, didn't leave a note. Just walked out of a life and into the dust. Some said he broke. Others said he was running from guilt. But the truth was simpler. He stopped believing the badge made a man good. Law could be clean. People never were. He finished saddling the gelding and mounted slow, boots sliding into stirrups with a familiar ease. His rifle was slung behind the cantle, but he didn't plan to use it. Not yet. The woman, whoever she was, had something in her eyes. Not just fear, not just desperation. Something broken, something cracked, but not entirely lost. He recognized it because he saw it in the mirror every morning. Some people call it ruin. He called it residue of love, of death, of things done in the name of survival. He'd let her go on purpose. Most wouldn't believe that. Letting a thief steal your horse and ride into the desert? That sounded like cowardice or carelessness. But he didn't care how it looked. The moment she drew that gun on him, her hands trembling against the weight of the metal, he knew she wasn't like the others. She wasn't greedy. She was cornered. People who are cornered make different kinds of choices. They don't steal to win. They steal to breathe. As he rode out of town, he didn't ask the wind for direction. He didn't need a map. He followed the trail she left behind. Faint hoof prints, turned sand, the occasional thread of fabric snagged on mesquite. But more than that, he followed the feeling. Like a thread pulling in his chest, not out of duty, but curiosity. Not who is she, but what happened to her. What turns a woman into someone who'd pull a gun just to keep moving? The desert stretched ahead, vast and sun-bleached, hiding her somewhere in its folds. He didn't plan to catch her fast. He planned to understand her first. That was the thing about being a marshal, even a lapsed one. You learn that most people's stories are hidden under the surface. The crime is just the crust. The real story lies in the cracks. He adjusted his hat, pulled it lower against the sun, and let the gelding find its rhythm. He wasn't chasing her. He was reading her, one track at a time. The desert didn't feel like freedom. It felt like judgment. Wide open, blistering and empty, in a way that made a person confront themselves, whether they wanted to or not. She rode until the sun dipped low behind jagged hills and the light bled red across the sand. Her hands were sore from holding the reins too tight, her legs numb from the saddle. And the quiet, the relentless, unforgiving quiet, was beginning to feel like a noose around her throat. She found a place to camp by a dried-out creek bed, where a twisted cottonwood clawed at the sky like it had been trying to escape the ground for years and lost the fight. She didn't make a fire at first. She just sat, back against the tree, arms wrapped around her knees, trying to keep her body from remembering how tired it was. When she finally gathered enough courage to untie the saddle, her arms trembled beneath its weight. Not just physical, the kind of heaviness that sinks when you know something's coming, and you don't know when. She laid it gently beside her, then crouched low, building a small fire with dry brush and bits of bark. She struck a match, shielded the flame from the wind, and watched it catch. The fire crackled to life, and with it came memories she'd buried so deep, she forgot they still had roots. Her name had once meant something. Not to the world, that was never her concern, but to someone, a man with shiny boots and a silver badge, the first to call her beautiful without sounding like he was about to lie. He wasn't a sheriff then, just a deputy with a steady voice and a crooked smile. She believed him, believed his promises, believed him when he said he'd protect her from the men who wanted her silence more than her love. But men with badges always had someone else to answer to. It wasn't long before he was gone, transferred or reassigned. She never really knew. Another lawman took his place, older, meaner, less interested in protecting and more interested in using. She tried to leave, but by then, they'd already written her story for her. Said she'd helped rob a freight line. Said she was a lookout for the gang. Said she knew things. Dangerous things. None of it was true, not then. But truth had never stood up well against men who carried the law in one hand and a lie in the other. They threatened to hang her, and she believed them. So she ran. She'd been running ever since. A bounty poster with her face had hung in 3 towns that she knew of. In one, she saw a copy nailed to the post office door, her eyes staring back at her in badly drawn ink. Armed. Dangerous. That part was half right. She was armed, sure. But dangerous. Only if survival counted as a threat. Now here she was, hiding in a dead creek bed with a stolen horse, eating beans from a dented can, and wondering how far she'd have to ride before the past got tired of chasing her. The fire popped. Sparks danced into the night like tiny stars that lost their way. She reached for the saddle to prop it behind her, to lean against something that still smelled of another life. Her hand brushed under the flap, and she froze. There was something etched there, something she hadn't noticed in the rush. She leaned closer, held the flap open with both hands, and squinted against the firelight. The letters were faded, but not enough to hide them. U.S. Marshal. Her breath caught, chest rising shallow. For a long moment, she didn't move, just stared at the stamp like it had crawled up out of the leather to mock her. Marshal. She'd stolen from a lawman. Not a rancher, not a farmer, not just some quiet stranger with kind eyes and a fast horse. She'd pointed a gun at a marshal, took his saddle, and rode away like she could outrun justice itself. Stupid, reckless. But more than that, confusing. Why hadn't he stopped her? He'd looked her in the eye. He could have shot her, could have arrested her. He didn't even raise his voice. Her fingers grazed the letters again, softer now. A kind of sick chill crept into her stomach. Not fear exactly, but something colder. Unease. If he was a marshal and he let her go, what did that mean? Was he toying with her? Testing her? Or worse, tracking her already, waiting for her to fall asleep? She stood and paced the edge of the camp, eyes flicking to the dark beyond the firelight. Nothing moved. The wind whispered through scrub brush. A coyote yipped far off, more lonely than threatening. Still, she couldn't rest. Not now. Not knowing what she knew. She sat again, arms wrapped around herself, shivering not from cold, but from something deeper. A creeping awareness that whatever game she thought she was playing, she wasn't the only one in it. The fire dimmed as the night grew deeper. She didn't sleep, just stared into the orange glow, haunted by a name she didn't yet know, and a badge she hadn't meant to steal. The night had sunk into silence, heavy and complete. Only the soft crackling of the dying fire marked the passing of time. She sat with her knees drawn up, chin resting on them, eyes lost in the low flames. Sleep hovered nearby, just out of reach, like a ghost that wouldn't touch her. The marshal's brand still echoed in her mind, carved deeper into her memory than into the saddle leather. Then she heard it, the unmistakable sound of a horse's slow approach. Not rushed, not reckless, just steady. She was on her feet before her thoughts could catch up. Her revolver was already in her hand, cocked, aimed toward the shadows where the brush met the moonlight. Her breath came fast, shallow, heart punching her ribs. The wind shifted, and then he appeared, just as calm as the desert sky above them. Same coat, same hat, same face that didn't flinch when she'd held him at gunpoint days ago. He stopped just outside the fire's circle, his horse halting with a soft snort. For a long, stretched moment, they didn't speak. The fire cracked between them, and her hands trembled ever so slightly. "You tracked me," she said, voice low, eyes locked on him. "I did," he replied, dismounting slowly. She raised the gun higher. "You here to take me in?" "No," he said. "If I was, I wouldn't have come alone." She didn't lower the weapon. "Then what do you want?" He stepped forward, hands clearly away from his belt, and sat. Not quickly, not cautiously, but with the ease of someone who'd sat by hundreds of fires like this. He didn't reach for his weapon, didn't raise his voice. He just sat there, across from her, between firelight and shadow. "I want coffee," he said simply. "Do you mind?" She blinked, confused. "Are you mocking me?" "No," he said, "but I've been riding a long way, and you've already got a flame going." He pulled a small tin from his coat pocket, battered, dusty, and unmistakably familiar. She watched as he leaned just close enough to set a small metal cup into the coals and poured in water from a flask. The beans went in next, crushed by hand. "You're insane," she muttered, still holding the gun. He gave a dry smile. Not insane, just tired and curious. She didn't lower the revolver, but she did stop pointing it quite so directly. Her arms were tired, and something about the way he moved, slow, deliberate, utterly unconcerned, was unbalancing. He didn't act like a marshal. He didn't act like a man hunting justice. He acted like someone who already knew how this would go. "You let me take your horse," she said. "I did." "You didn't stop me." "Nope." "Why?" He stirred the cup gently, his eyes never leaving the fire. "Because you didn't want the horse. You wanted to run." She hesitated. "And now?" He looked up at her, not challenging, not stern, just present. "Now I want to know why." For a moment, she didn't speak. The question hung in the air like dust in a sunbeam, visible, weightless, impossible to hold. Her arms slowly lowered, revolver still in her grip, but no longer aimed. Her fingers were aching. She slid it into her lap and sat across from him, knees drawn up, eyes wary. "You're not what I thought," she said. "Most people aren't," he replied. "You thought I was going to shoot you?" "I thought you'd arrest me, or worse." He nodded, understanding. "You've met lawmen who did worse." Her jaw clenched. The fire danced in her eyes. Lawmen like to pretend their sins smell better. He didn't argue, didn't defend the badge. He just handed her the cup of coffee, careful, respectful, like a man handing a stranger a fragile truth. She didn't take it at first, just stared at it. Then, slowly, she reached out and wrapped her fingers around the warm tin. "Why follow me?" she asked, voice softer now. "If not for the reward?" He leaned back, sipped from his own cup, the tin warm against his weathered hands. "You've got something in your eyes," he said. "Something familiar." "Pity?" "No," he replied. Damage. Same kind I carry. She looked away, ashamed of how close his words landed. The fire was dying, but neither of them moved to feed it. The darkness around them grew thicker, pressing in. And yet, for the first time in days, she didn't feel entirely alone. "I don't want saving," she said. "I'm not here to save you," he answered. "I just wanted to sit for a minute, share the dark." For a while, they didn't speak. The stars emerged, quiet witnesses to whatever this was becoming. Two fugitives, one by law, the other by soul, sitting across a fire, drinking cheap coffee, sharing a silence that spoke more than any interrogation. When she finally spoke again, her voice had lost its edge. "What now?" He looked up at the moon, then back at her. "Now we wait for the fire to die," he said. "Then you decide if you want to run again." And just like that, the tension slipped away, not vanished, but loosened, like a knot untied by time instead of force. She didn't know if she'd trust him come morning. She didn't even know if she should. But for this one night, beneath stars older than both of them, she let the silence wrap. Around them, like a blanket, neither had asked for, but both needed. The fire had burned low, just embers now, pulsing softly like a tired heartbeat. The cold was creeping in from all directions, but neither of them moved. She sat with her arms crossed, still gripping the edge of the coffee cup as if letting go of it might cause something else inside her to fall apart. Across the fire, he rested on his side, elbow in the dirt, his eyes steady, quiet, and searching. Then he said it again. Not loud, not proud, just gently, like a stone dropped into still water. "You just rode off with a marshal's saddle." She didn't react at first. The words hovered in the night, touching the edges of her breathing, pressing into the space between them. Then, slowly, the crack appeared. Not a panic, not a gasp, but a shift in her eyes. Something wide and uncertain flickering behind her lashes. She looked down at her cup. Her voice came smaller than she intended. "You said that before." "I did," he said, "and I meant it both times." Silence stretched, long and frayed. Then she whispered, "You're still a marshal?" He didn't answer right away. His hand brushed some dust from the brim of his hat, then rested it on his knee. "I was," he said finally. "Not anymore. Not for a while." She looked up sharply. "Then why follow me?" He met her eyes, slow and unafraid. "Habit, maybe. Curiosity. Maybe I saw something in you I recognized." She stared at him. "And what exactly do you think you saw?" He smiled, not the kind that mocks or soothes, but something more like regret with edges. Someone who's been lied to by people who wear stars. Someone who ran because staying meant dying inside. That hit too close. She glanced away, blinking hard. The desert around them was so quiet, she could hear the shift of her own thoughts. "You don't know me," she said finally. He nodded. "Not fully. But I know the way you sat by this fire last night. Not like someone hiding, like someone trying not to be found by herself." She inhaled deeply, shaking her head, trying not to let him in. "You think talking like that changes anything? That it earns trust?" "No," he said softly. "I don't expect trust. I expect truth. You deserve mine, at least." He leaned forward slightly, letting the firelight dance across the lines on his face. He looked older under the stars, not in years, but in sorrow. I buried my wife 3 years ago. Shot dead by a man I let ride once. Thought I saw goodness in him too. Thought I could save him. She stiffened. I hunted him for months after. Killed him in a canyon near Tucson. Never filed the report. Just handed in the badge and kept riding. She didn't speak. I wasn't tracking you because I'm a marshal, he continued. I was tracking you because I've seen that look before. In the mirror. In men who thought vengeance would make them whole. Her hand trembled slightly on the cup. I read the posters, he said, almost as an afterthought. About what happened in Dry Creek. About the sheriff who didn't make it back. The banker's missing money. The girl with the red scarf. Her eyes narrowed. So, now you're going to arrest me? No, he said flatly. You're not the villain in your own story, are you? That startled her. She lowered the cup, staring at him. Her breath caught somewhere between defense and disbelief. Most men don't ask questions when they see a reward posted, she muttered. I stopped being most men a long time ago. The wind picked up slightly, stirring the embers. She looked down at them as if trying to find her own story in the glow. I didn't kill that sheriff, she said. He came after me like I was property. Said if I didn't pay for what was taken, he'd take it from me in flesh. He didn't flinch, just listened. I fought back, knocked him out, took his keys and his horse. I never touched the damn money. But you ran, wouldn't you? He nodded. I've been running ever since, she said, her voice thick now. Not because I'm guilty, but because I knew no one would care to hear why. He shifted closer to the fire, just enough so the glow touched both their faces evenly now. You're not wrong, he said. Most wouldn't. But I do. She looked at him then. Really looked. And something inside her cracked, just a little. Not broken, not spilling over, just softened. Just enough to feel the cold again. You could have taken me back that first night, she whispered. I could have. But you didn't. I wanted to see what you'd do with the saddle. A faint laugh escaped her lips. It was tired and bitter, but real. A damn marshal's saddle. Still rides smooth, doesn't it? She shook her head and finally looked up toward the stars. They stretched endlessly overhead. Quiet, judgmentless, old as stories, and just as distant. So what now? She asked. Now? He leaned back again, hands behind his head. Now we sit. Let the fire tell us what comes next. And somehow, in that small, unremarkable moment, surrounded by dust, shame, truth, and the ruins of two broken pasts, she didn't feel hunted. She didn't feel judged. She felt seen. And for the first time in years, she didn't want to run. The fire had long turned to ash. A pale gray light seeped into the world, spilling across the ridges and valleys of the desert. Morning came slow and silent, as if unsure whether it was welcome. He hadn't slept, just watched the stars blink out one by one, then listened to the wind hum low through the brush. She sat across from him, knees drawn up, chin resting on her arms. Her scarf was gone, hair loose, tangled from the wind and sleep. Something about her had shifted. Not her stance, still guarded, still coiled like a rattler that hadn't decided whether to strike or slip away. But her eyes. There was distance in them, yes, but not the same kind of distance as before. Not the kind that kept everyone out. This time, it felt more like a fork in the road, she didn't know how to walk. He broke the quiet with a voice that didn't try to be gentle. It simply was. "You've got two paths now." She didn't look up. "I know. You could keep running, change horses, change names, keep outpacing the stories chasing you." Still no reaction. "Or," he said, pausing, letting the word hang, "you ride with me, back to Dry Creek, together." Her eyes lifted slowly. "To what? Stand trial?" "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe just face the people who got used to hearing one version of what happened." She blinked. Her voice was quiet and bitter. "They've already picked their villain." "Then maybe it's time someone rides in and tells them they picked wrong." She scoffed, half laughing, half scoffing. "You think it's that easy?" "No," he said. "I think it's damn near impossible. But sometimes justice ain't about winning. It's about showing up." The fire popped softly, one last echo of heat. A crow called far in the distance. He leaned forward. "If you ride with me, I won't let them touch you unless they hear everything first. I'll make sure they listen. That's my word." She shook her head, eyes glossy. "Why? Why help me?" "I already told you. I've seen what guilt does to a soul, even when it doesn't belong there. You didn't kill that man in cold blood. You didn't steal money. But you've been carrying the sentence anyway." She wiped at her face quickly, as if the wind had kicked dust into her eyes. But it wasn't dust. Her jaw trembled for half a second, before she tightened it again. "I don't want pity." "This ain't pity," he said. "It's recognition." She turned her face from him, breathing hard through her nose. The silence returned, stretched thin between them. Then, out of it, her voice cracked. "I can't do that again," she said. "I can't walk into a room full of men with hands on their holsters and lies on their lips and hope they'll suddenly care about the truth." He nodded. "I won't lie to you. It might end badly. But it won't end with you hiding in a cave or hunted down like a dog. It ends with you deciding." Her voice fell to a whisper. "What if I'm too tired to decide?" He watched her for a moment. Then he stood slowly, brushing dust from his coat. He didn't push her, didn't reach out or say another word. He just walked a few paces away and looked out toward the horizon where the sun had begun to touch the edges of the earth. When he finally turned back, her face was in her hands. Shoulders stiff, breath shaking, not sobbing, not falling apart, just leaking the pain in tiny, silent cracks. He sat back down. "I'll be heading east at dawn, through Dead Horse Canyon. You know the trail." She didn't respond, but her hands came down. Her eyes were wet, but steady. She met his gaze, then looked away again. "I'm not promising anything," she said. "You don't have to," he replied. "Just don't lie to yourself about which road you want." They said nothing more. The morning stretched, each moment louder in the stillness than any word could have been. And when sleep finally took her, curled near the last of the warmth, he kept watch, not as a marshal, not as a pursuer, but as someone who understood what it meant to choose between flight and truth. When the sun rose fully, he stirred the fire one last time, brewed a weak cup of coffee, saddled his horse without haste. She was still sleeping, or pretending to. He didn't wake her. He just tucked a small note under a stone near her boot. One last gesture, silent and full of possibility. Then he rode out, slow and measured, leaving no trail more than the wind would erase by noon. When she woke, the first thing she noticed was the quiet. The second was the note. It was folded neatly, simple handwriting. It read, "Dead Horse Canyon, by sundown, if you want your story told." She stared at it for a long time. The fire was gone. The saddle still sat by her bedroll, its Marshall's brand barely visible under dust and use. She picked it up, ran her hand along the leather. Then she turned the note over. On the back, scrawled in her own hand, though she didn't remember writing it, were the words, "Maybe I'll see you in the canyon." The desert stretched out in every direction like a faded memory, wide, quiet, and indifferent to the weight of human stories. The sun hovered low, bleeding its golden light across the cliffs and bones of the land. In the distance, Dead Horse Canyon yawned open like a scar. Time didn't move here. It drifted. He arrived just past midday, dust rising behind his horse in slow, lazy swirls. His face was unreadable, a mask of quiet determination, shaped by years of carrying truths too heavy for most men. He didn't come fast. There was no need. Either she'd be there, or she wouldn't. Either way, the ride was worth it. As he neared the canyon mouth, he saw her. She was standing beside her horse, arms crossed, silhouette painted sharp against the sandstone cliffs. She wasn't hiding. She wasn't armed. Just there, waiting. Like maybe she'd been waiting for longer than just that morning. Maybe her whole life had been one long arrival to this moment. He didn't smile, didn't wave, just nodded once, the kind of nod that meant you showed up. She nodded back. For a while, they said nothing. The wind moved more than they did. Between them hung everything they had not yet said: anger, regret, understanding, and something else neither dared name. Not quite peace, not quite longing, just recognition. She stepped forward, brushing her hand along her horse's neck. "You came," she said, though she hadn't expected him not to. "I said I would." She looked away into the canyon. The rock walls glowed amber in the falling light. "You still want to take me in?" He took his time answering. "I want the truth told. That don't always mean a jail cell." She raised an eyebrow. "And if the town still wants blood?" He shrugged. "Then they'll have to take mine first." A pause, long, waited. "You don't even know me," she said. "I know enough." She searched his face for the doubt, but there wasn't any. Only tired kindness and a kind of quiet sorrow. He'd known loss. He'd known betrayal. And somehow, he still believed that the right thing was worth doing, even if it changed nothing. They stood like that a while longer. The world around them faded to hues of copper and rose. Coyotes howled in the far distance. A hawk traced circles high above their heads, looking for something forgotten in the dust. Finally, she said, "I don't know where this ends." "Neither do I," he replied. She mounted her horse. Her hand lingered for a second on the saddle horn, the one she'd stolen, the one that had, somehow, become the beginning of something. He mounted too, the leather creaking beneath him. They didn't speak again. Didn't need to. The language of the West didn't always need words. They rode in silence, side by side, their shadows long behind them and the canyon yawning open ahead. For the first mile, they were just two riders. No past, no names. Just hooves and dust and the wind pressing gently at their backs. She glanced at him once, just once, but he didn't return the look. He knew she was still measuring him, still holding a part of herself back. And maybe she always would. But something had shifted. Not forgiveness, not yet. But a crack in the armor, a space wide enough for possibility. As the trail bent west, she finally broke the silence. "What'll they call us?" He looked forward, the horizon painting fire into his eyes. Outlaws, liars, or maybe just people who stopped running. She considered that, then gave a short laugh, tired, amused, and maybe a little grateful. "Names," she said. "People love names." "They do." The wind kicked up a swirl of dust, carried it around them, then let it settle. In the distance, the first lights of Dry Creek shimmered like ghosts on the edge of dusk. As the town came into view, she didn't slow. Neither did he. Whatever came next, they'd ride into it together. Not quite allies, not quite strangers. Something in between, something old, like the land itself. Worn, broken, but still standing. And then, as the screen of the story would begin to dim, the final words settle in like the hush before nightfall. In the West, names carry dust, and sometimes they carry forgiveness too.